as a Lakers fan, somebody who has watched 95% of their games year in and year out, as somebody who has watched Luka Doncic very closely since he's came into the league and just had such a huge impact right out the gate, I've came to this realization, right? I've came to this realization and I've started putting together this working theory that Luka Doncic is much more of a special talent than he is a special transcendent basketball savant. And I think narratives would have us thinking that he's an exceptional basketball thinker. And the more I watch him play, the more I just realize that he really leans into his talent. And this isn't saying that one's better than the other. I think if you look at historically great basketball players in the NBA, there are guys who are special talents. There are guys who have very, very high basketball IQs. And then when those two things converge, and you get the guys who have both, that's when you see the upper echelon of players, the best ever, the LeBrons, the Mikes, the Kobe's, the Kareems, the Tim Duncans, the Larry Birds, the Magics, right? That's when you see that special group of guys, right? When talent and basketball IQ meet in the middle, mixed in there with some hard work and all that sort of stuff, and you get the best ever. But when I think about just great players, they usually emphasize one or the other, right? When I think of Dwight Howard, when I think of Shaq, even though Shaq's so dominant, one of the best ever. When I think of, even Kevin Durant, um, there's a few others that are just not jumping out at me. Luka Doncic is one who I'd put in this category. These guys are special, special, special basketball talents, but maybe don't have quite the same caliber of basketball IQ that some of the other great players had. Now, when I think of guys who had great basketball IQs, but maybe not the best, or the most talent, I think of guys like Steve Nash, maybe a Jason Kidd, maybe a Chauncey Billups, maybe a Ray Allen is a good one, right? A guy who's 6'5", who, don't get me wrong, is a special talent in his own right. But I think for when you're talking about in the context of NBA All Stars, he's a guy who high basketball IQ, could play within continuity, could play with the ball in his hands, could come off screens, could play off the ball, did so many things well, and just knew how to be in the right place at the right time, knew how to get himself in positioning, and all this stuff just leads me to believe he was a very high basketball IQ guy, right? So you see the difference, right? You see how there's guys who are supreme level talent, and you see guys who just have these savant level basketball IQs that lead them to have so much success in the basketball, in the NBA and in their basketball careers. And Luka, like I said, I think he gets credited for being a great basketball mind because of perception more than reality, right? I think the perception is he's, a European. I think Europeans typically get credited with high basketball IQs because they're European. I think because his athleticism doesn't jump on the page, and he's not a traditional talent in the sense that he's not like a super dynamic athlete who can do things that nobody else can do. His talent looks a little bit different. So I think he gets credited for not looking the part, right, in terms of being an explosive athlete. And then I also think he gets credit for his passing ability, right? Having such a unique level of passing ability that not too many guys have, and being able to make reads that other guys can't make. I think all three of those things, being European, being less athletic than other guys, and being such a good passer, lead us to create this narrative that he's just a special basketball mind. And the more I watch him play, the more I think he is a unique and special talent who still has a lot of work to do when it comes to thinking the game and having a high basketball IQ. Right? He is a talent in that his passing, I think, is God given. I think his passing ability is one that is very natural to him and very spur of the moment. That's why you see all the tricks, the behind the backs, the behind the heads, the driving, pump fake, throw it under you. You didn't realize how it came. Um, because an intelligent passer, right, is, I'm bounce passing it here, I'm throwing it up there. Very simple stuff, getting in the spots, making reads. And this isn't to say that these things don't converge somewhat, right? This isn't to say that Luka has zero basketball IQ. But the more I watch him play, it just feels like he's a very natural and creative basketball player. A very fluid basketball player is a way that I can put it, right? And what gives me hope is that knowing that he is such a good and I think still raw talent in certain ways, um, raw in that I think a lot of his basketball IQ is still undiscovered, means that he still has so much progress to make. And I think we've come to this fork in the road point with Luka over the past season, 2 seasons. We're like, you got to get in shape. You got to get in shape. You got to turn back the clock and look more like the athlete that you were in 2019 and 2020, where you were driving and dunking more and getting a dunk every so often, and et cetera, et cetera. And I got to tell you guys, that Luka, I don't think is coming back, right? I think the Luka that we see now is a Luka that can sustain in terms of his athletic capabilities over the next, 6, 7 seasons into his, early to mid 30s. Um, but if he can start to think the game better, and if he can start to control the game better, if he can start to make better reads, better choices, be in better positions, I think this is where Luka Doncic can make the jump to being, one of the best offensive players in the league, to being a MVP, to being a champion, to being all the things that he is on the brink of achieving, right? I think it's all behind that basketball IQ door. And people may tell me I'm tripping, right? For all the reasons that I said before, right? His passing ability, his lack of athleticism, and the way he gets his shots off. I think Luka's gifts, right? His ability to change directions, his creativity with his handle, his ability to use his body, have those wide shoulders, be able to get down and get into people. To me, the way he gets his shots off and the shots that he makes, this is all talent based stuff to me, right? Like obviously he has a great skill set, etc. But like the uniqueness is in his game leads me to believe he's just a special talent as opposed to someone who is a really well thought and well versed basketball player. And if he can start to put these things together again, I tell you what, guys, I think the sky is the limit. And where I see his basketball, because I want to make sure I'm not just telling you guys something for you to believe me. I want you to go back and do the work and watch the film. Um, let's start on the defensive end of the floor. I know watching him in that Boston series in the finals a few years ago was an eyesore. But for me, it wasn't an eyesore because he just continued to get beat, right? If you're getting beat because you just can't move, right, then it is what it is. Your team has to build around you. But when I watched that series, I remember thinking, why are you putting yourself at such a disadvantage every time? You're guarding, Tatum or Jaylen Brown or, Derek White, whoever, Drew Holiday, and you're just getting beat downhill every time. Luka Doncic is a slow guy who I swear thinks he's the best athlete on the court. Because watching that series was a pain because he consistently was getting his hips on players on the perimeter. And if you know what that means, it means that you're pressing up way too close, right? So he would consistently try to guard a Jaylen Brown, a Jason Tatum with his body, and he'd just be, food for him every time, barbecue chicken, right? And it didn't matter what the situation was, right? It didn't matter what the time of the game was. If he's on the ball really trying to sit down and defend, he was going to pressure. He was going to put his hips on you, try and give you a little bump, and then he was going to get beat, right? That was all he had on the defensive end of the floor. When in reality, you don't need to be the best athlete to be a capable or even good defender. But what you do need to do is you need to be disciplined and staying in your spot, staying rooted to your defensive principles. And if you can do that, usually you are going to have much more success, right? Now, that doesn't mean that, if he's disciplined, he's not going to struggle on an island with Tatum and Brown. But what that does mean is if one of those guys, one of those special wing players has him on an island, you can at least try to force them into shots that you want them to take. You can at least try and force them into jump shots. You can at least try to stay physical, stay in front, and make them take a contested two as opposed to getting downhill and then the rest of your team's playing catch up. And it just seems like he doesn't have the wherewithal. Now I see it all the time on the Lakers as well to be a disciplined defender and do that stuff. You know what I'm saying? And then as a 6'7" guy, close out the possession as a rebounder on the defensive end of the floor, etc. On the offensive end of the floor, it's the same way. Like I understand that Luka, part of Luka's greatness is his ability to be creative, right? But his time to score sometimes, his time and score when he's choosing to take what shots, when he chooses to take over the offense versus when he allows the continuity of their offense and the set plays and all that stuff to get them things. It's just it's not always there. It's like I know he's always been the primary ball handler, but sometimes it feels like since coming into the league, some of the habits he's developed just haven't been aligned with his best interest. So say all this to say, I think Luka has a lot of room for growth. I think he's more a special talent than he is a special IQ, and I think if he grows his IQ, then he could be what we think he could be.